So what we've done here is we cleaned everything up and we splashed some paint on there just to protect the metal all over, and then also on the inside of the fender there. So we've got that all finished, ready to go, and we can put this fender back on. Now in my case, with my modified bumper that I built here, here's the two brackets that we painted and put back on there. And I just have 2 bolts there, and that's going to bolt into the front portion of the fender. And then on the top, you have your factory locations here, and that's where you're going to bolt all your holes in here on the top. And then this is just kind of supports it. And I don't know, I had to cut this away with a knife. It's got some foam kind of sticky material from factory there, but I'm just going to leave it like that. This will help just support it. And then we're going to have our last fastener there, and then we've got our 2 that we made down at the bottom. So those are going to be all our fasteners. Put this fender on. We've installed that fender and we've just left everything loose. So we've got a couple screws here, a couple there, one there, and then along the top here. Now, the reason to leave that loose is when we get our door over there, that's when we're going to set our gap between the fender and the door. So it's on, but it's just loose, and we'll tweak it when we do our final assembly with the doors. Looking from the top here, this is where we had those 2 holes in the floor, and this is in a line because this is where the tack welds were, and we used the hammer and chisel to remove something on the bottom, and we created those holes. So what we're going to do to repair that is we're going to take the step drill here, we're going to drill our hole. You can see I've already done that one, and I'm going to do the same with this one here, and this ends up being a 3/4 inch hole. And then we just have like a plug, just a little disc of metal that we're going to put in there, and we'll just hold that in there. Also, you'll see that I'm going to have to remove a lot of this stuff to get it out of the way so we can actually weld that in place. So we'll drill these out, tack these plugs in, and that's going to be how we repair the holes in the floor. We've removed the silicone in here. We've drilled our 2 holes, remove some of the paint there so we can tack weld everything. We have the 1 plug in this position here, and this is what I got going on. All it is a magnet on the bottom that's going to hold that in place, and then I'll put a couple tacks on, remove the magnet, and then we'll weld it in place there. The plugs are welded in there. We just tack welded them. When that magnet is across, I'm tack welding on either side of the magnet. The magnet will affect the weld, so just 2 tacks on there, hold it, get that magnet out of there, and now we can finish weld. If a person wanted to go any further, they could try and straighten it out to their satisfaction with hammer and dolly to get that metal nice and flat. But since this is the floor, I'm not splitting hairs. As long as it's flat and true to a certain degree, I'm satisfied with that. And also too, remember, we've got to have our gap in there. If we close in on there, you can see that we've got a gap in there. And what we're doing with that, this is a 3/4 inch plug, and so when we take the step drill, we just go 1 size bigger, and that's going to provide our gap for us. So now we'll finish tack welding this thing into place. We've got everything welded. We're grinding down the high spots, smooth it out a little bit and stuff like that. When you're going in there, you're just going to tack it, and you're just going to keep tacking it slowly all the way around. While you're doing that, get in there with the compressed air, cool that down so you don't burn through. Always, there's going to be times when you're burning through, even if it's good metal. Sometimes it's thin, and you'll have to just keep working at it until you get it all sealed up. Now in my case, I couldn't help myself. There's a gap down in there, so I threw some metal down in the gap down in the corner. But as I say, probably not necessary. You could have filled that with silicone if you want. So I'll just finish grinding that down, smoothing it out, and then we're pretty much done for this spot here. The only thing left is if you want to put some silicone back down where we had to remove it. We got the same circumstance up the front here. When we're removing that metal, we ended up punching 2 holes in here. So again, we just drill that out, we put our plugs in. We want to kind of line them up so we've got clearance all the way around, so that when we weld it in, we'll get a full weld in there. Got those plugs welded in. We'll grind them down a little bit. Don't need to. This will all get covered up with mat and flooring and stuff like that. But we'll grind down the high spots, clean it up a little bit. And then where all this fresh metal is here, we'll splash a little bit of paint on there as well, try and keep it from rusting. We ground down the weld on that, smoothed it out a little bit, and we've painted all our bare metal spots up here in the front, and again here in the back where we did that work there, and where we did that work there. Now that we're satisfied that the floor is all fixed, all the holes are plugged, and we've got everything done and painted the exposed metal, now we can start putting the interior back together here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bolt on our electrical on the side here. So we've got our wiring bolted on here, and that's what we did earlier, was we welded some captive nuts on the other side. So we're just using some 1/4-inch bolts here. This one, I made that nut on there just so you could get at it a little easier. It's pretty close to here. You might have to use an open-end wrench to be able to pull that out, put it back in. But the other ones here, like that one and this one here, just normal bolts and washers, and bolted that to the side. Again, in the back, we've got one here, we've got one there, and we've got our final one in the corner here. So now that we've got our wiring all bolted on the side all the way down to the front there, now we can lay the carpet down and start reassembling the interior here. As we're assembling the interior, we ended up having to put on the doors because the wiring for the back door there, it has to go through the pillar and it has to get connected before we put on that inside panel piece there. So we threw the doors on and we got them all fitting and closing good. But what we had to do was down in the bottom, this corner here, we had to grind some more material there because it was kind of forcing that edge, that corner out a little bit. So we had to do a little touch up there. We're assembling this panel in here, and it starts at the front and it goes all the way to the back. Again, what we did was we welded some captive nuts for these 1/4-inch Allen head fasteners. So we've got one there, one down here, another one here in the front, going back towards the back. Here's one there, here's our center pillar, and here's our final one there. Here was the wiring from the back door that had to go in, and it had to get connected in behind the panel here. So that's why we had to put the back door on first before we could put that panel in place. So we've got the carpet laid down, we've got our interior side panel on, we have our brackets put back on here for the back seat. We can easily assemble that back seat there, and we have this top pillar portion to put on yet. After we get that on, we can put the seat back in. We've got the interior put all back together with our panels and our seats and everything like that. We've got the doors set, and we've got that front fender set. There's a side profile there of the doors and the fender and the rocker slider on the bottom. And then again from this angle over here. It's time to fill in this void space that we got in here in the back wheel well. So I made my cardboard template here, but we have this like lip of metal here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut this out, and then that cardboard is just gonna extend over here just enough to touch this and tack it on there. So it'll be tacked on here, it'll be tacked on there, and then we'll weld it in here. And then all we gotta do is I kinda put a rough line in there. I'm gonna hit it with the zippy disc in here, and then we're just gonna bend this metal over. Here we've got that piece tacked in there, and then now we'll finish weld it in place. Here's the patch all welded in here. We've seam welded it all the way around. And what we ended up doing up here was we just put a piece of metal in here, and we welded it on the edge. And then we welded it in here, and I got like a piece of triangular metal that goes in up into the seam there. We'll end up putting some silicone in that crack where we've taken it out, but we've pretty much got it all seam welded, so no moisture or anything should get in behind there now. The only thing left to do is to sand it and paint it. We're pretty much finished with this job now, and here's the rocker slider after it's all done. We had to tweak our door in the end there just so it would close nice, do a little grinding on the metal. We've got our profile there of how it transitions from the wheel well on the back, and it's going along. And here's the profile on the front there where it transitions from the wheel well as well. And everything is installed. We've got our fender on there, we've got our doors on, everything's complete. Here's a quick look at the access to those bolts, and this is in the rear wheel well, and again in the front here, in the front wheel well, and that's the access to get in there to unbolt this and pull it out. Lastly, here's a look at the whole thing disassembled. So you've got the rocker slider with the stubs there, and then you've got your 2 receivers that unbolt and come off, and everything will just have to be cleaned up and painted and reinstalled. Here's a look where that stub will slide into the receiver on the back, and that's where it bolts in, and then you've got in along the back and the top is where the receiver is going to bolt onto the body of the Jeep. One thought I have is possibly drilling a large hole in the back there as a drain, so if there's any water or anything that gets in there, it'll drain out easy and it won't get plugged up and full of mud or dirt or whatever. Here's a picture of the front stub and receiver here. Again, you can see where that slides in, bolts in, and then where that's going to bolt in onto the body. Here's a look at where it's going to be bolted in there. And everything turned out pretty good. It all comes apart nice and easy and goes back together nice and easy. And so if you decided that you didn't want the rocker slider, you could totally remove it all off of there. Here's an angle from the back with the rocker slider removed. And here's an angle from the front. I prefer the removable method better. That way you can remove it, install it as you wish. If you had to remove it for some reason to repair something or get at something, then this all comes off. So I guess the idea would be, again, you want to make components so that they can come apart and go back together for access, for repairs, just for installation and removal. I'm pretty pleased with the way it turned out. Look forward to doing it again on another Jeep.